Somewhere in a patent office in Alexandria, Virginia, a stamp came down on a piece of paper, and almost nobody noticed what it actually said. The headline screamed that Tesla's patent confirmed a 20-seat autonomous Robovan. But confirmed is a dangerous word, and if you actually read what the United States Patent and Trademark Office granted, you find something much smaller and much stranger. This is not a story about a van. This is a story about a company playing legal chess while the rest of the industry is still trying to figure out the rules of the board. Let's start with the piece nobody is talking about. On August the 4th, 2026, Tesla was granted design patent number D1138869S. Not a utility patent, not a technology patent, a design patent. In plain English, that means the government agreed to protect the shape of the vehicle, the way it looks, the silhouette, the faceless capsule body, the enclosed wheel wells, the wraparound glass. It does not protect the way it drives, it does not protect the software, it does not protect the seating configuration, and it absolutely does not obligate Tesla to build a single one. Somewhere between the patent office and the internet, that distinction got lost, and an entire news cycle was built on top of the gap. Here is the golden fact, the one buried under all the excitement. Tesla filed for this design protection back in October of 2024, at the same event where Elon Musk stood on a Warner Brothers soundstage in Los Angeles and said the Robovan could carry up to 20 people or be reconfigured to haul cargo instead. That claim, the 20-seat number, came from Musk's mouth, not from the patent. The patent came almost 2 full years later. Two companies could read the exact same headline this week. Tesla patent confirms 20-seat Robovan, and walk away with completely different pictures of reality. One thinks Tesla is about to build a bus. The other, the one who actually read the filing, understands Tesla just locked down a look and is quietly making sure nobody else can copy that look while the actual vehicle remains at best years away. So why would a company as famous for engineering flash as Tesla spend legal resources protecting the outside of a car nobody can buy yet? This is where the industrial war begins. Because in the automotive world, shape is not decoration, shape is strategy. When you design a vehicle with no grille, no hood in the traditional sense, no visible driver cockpit, and no front windshield built for a human behind a wheel, you are not just making a styling choice. You are broadcasting an intention to every competitor watching. You are telling Ford, telling General Motors, telling BYD, telling every Chinese manufacturer racing to build the same kind of vehicle that this particular silhouette, this particular interpretation of a driverless people mover belongs to Tesla now. Nobody else gets to make a faceless Art Deco Streamliner shuttle without risking a lawsuit. That is not innovation for the sake of innovation. That is territory marking. The same instinct that made oil companies fight over pipeline routes a century ago. Except now, the territory is a shape nobody has legally seen drive itself yet. And the timing is not an accident either. This patent did not appear out of nowhere in August of 2026. It landed months after Tesla's Cybercab, the 2-passenger robotaxi with no steering wheel and no pedals at all, actually started rolling off the line at Gigafactory, Texas, somewhere between February and April of that same year. By June, those Cybercabs were already doing supervised road testing in Austin, with a human safety monitor riding shotgun instead of behind a wheel that does not exist. Picture that for a second. A vehicle built from the ground up with the assumption that a human will never need to grab the wheel because there is no wheel to grab. That is not a concept car anymore. That is a production vehicle on American public roads in the same year this Robovan patent was granted. The Robovan is the big brother waiting in the wings, and the Cybercab is the proof that Tesla is willing to actually build the small one first. Now here is where the story stops being about design and starts being about Washington. Because for decades, federal vehicle safety standards in the United States simply assumed a human would be sitting behind a wheel. Steering columns, pedals, mirrors, all of it was baked into law under the assumption that a person, not a computer, was making the final call. A car without a steering wheel was not just unusual, it was, in a very real sense, illegal to mass produce and sell on American roads. That is the wall every autonomous vehicle company has been quietly negotiating with regulators to knock down piece by piece for years. And in the summer of 2026, that wall started to crack. Between June and July, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration proposed dropping the brake pedal requirement specifically for vehicles built with no human driver in mind at all. The agency's own administrator, Jonathan Morrison, went on record saying the agency would, in his words, absolutely consider ending the steering wheel mandate entirely for vehicles that are designed to never be operated by a person. Read that again. A senior federal regulator openly discussing the death of the mandatory steering wheel. In the same year, Tesla is patenting a faceless 20-seat capsule and already building a 2-seat version with no wheel on the production line. That is not a coincidence of timing. That is an industry and a regulator moving toward each other, each one waiting to see who blinks first. This is the real geopolitical layer most people are missing. Tesla is not the only company that has been chipping away at this wall. Zoox, the robotaxi company under Amazon's umbrella, already secured federal safety exemptions to operate steering wheel-free vehicles on public roads, ahead of Tesla's own cybercab tests. Waymo, the Google-backed operator running large-scale driverless ride-hailing across multiple American cities, has largely kept traditional controls in its vehicles, partly for regulatory comfort and partly for flexibility. So picture the board. In one corner, a company already exempted and driving wheel-free. In another, a company still hedging its bets with conventional controls. And in the middle, Tesla, racing to combine a production-ready small robotaxi with a patented, much larger 20-seat concept, betting that federal rules will bend to meet it before its competitors lock up the market first. Whoever gets to scale, whoever gets the regulatory green light for the biggest, most efficient version of a driverless people mover first, does not just win a product category. They win the blueprint the entire American mobility industry gets built on top of for the next generation. Let's talk about why 20 seats actually matters, because the number itself is doing more strategic work than most viewers realize. A single passenger robotaxi is a taxi replacement. It competes with Uber, with Lyft, with a driver you already know how to hail from your phone. That is a real business, but it is an incremental one. A 20-seat autonomous vehicle with no driver cost at all is not competing with a taxi anymore. It is competing with a bus route. It is competing with corporate shuttle contracts, airport transfer services, campus transportation, even certain short-haul commuter rail replacements in cities that never built the infrastructure for trains in the first place. Strip out the salary of a bus driver, strip out the fixed schedule inefficiency of a route that runs half empty at 3 in the afternoon, and let software decide in real time where the vehicle needs to be, and you are not looking at a slightly better car. You are looking at an entirely different category of transportation economics, one where the cost per passenger mile could fall dramatically simply because there is no human being paid to sit up front for 8 hours a shift. That is the quiet threat sitting underneath this whole story, and it explains why traditional bus operators, shuttle companies, and even some ride-hailing platforms should be paying very close attention to a single design patent most casual readers will scroll past in about 4 seconds. If Tesla or any competitor actually gets federal clearance to run a large capacity, no driver, no steering wheel vehicle at scale, the math that has kept public transit budgets and private shuttle contracts stable for decades starts to shift underneath everyone's feet. Nobody needs to lose their job tomorrow for that pressure to be real. The threat of a cheaper, driverless alternative is often enough to reshape an entire industry's pricing and investment decisions years before the technology is actually sitting on the street corner. So here is the honest tension this documentary needs to sit with, because pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Everything about the patent itself is real. The filing exists. The grant date is real. The inventors are named. The design is legally protected. Musk's 20-seat claim is real too, on the record, from an actual event, reported by multiple outlets at the time. The cybercab production run is real. The Austin testing is real. The NHTSA proposals are real, made by a named federal official on the record in the summer of 2026. What is not confirmed, what remains entirely unproven, is whether any of this actually becomes a Robovan you or I could ride in. There is no announced production date. Independent analysts studying Tesla's manufacturing pipeline are pointing toward 2027 at the very earliest, with some pushing that estimate out to 2028. A design patent is not a factory. A confident claim on a stage is not a delivery date. And a regulator saying they would absolutely consider changing a rule is not the same as the rule actually changing. So here's the question worth sitting with, the one worth arguing about in the comments below. If the federal government does eventually remove the steering wheel requirement entirely for vehicles never meant to be driven by a person, does that open the floodgates for every automaker to abandon the driver's seat within the decade? Or does the steering wheel survive anyway, not because the law demands it, but because enough people simply refuse to get into a vehicle where nobody and nothing gives them the option to grab the wheel themselves? Is this the beginning of the end of driving as a skill Americans expect to have? Or just a niche category for airport shuttles and campus loops, while the rest of us keep our hands on a wheel out of habit and maybe out of trust? What is undeniable, whatever side of that argument you land on, is that the vehicle sitting in your driveway right now was designed around a very old assumption. The assumption that a human being would always be the one making the final call behind the wheel. That assumption is no longer guaranteed, not because of a single patent, not because of a single event on a studio soundstage, but because a patent office, a regulator, and a factory floor in Texas all moved in the same direction in the same 12-month window. And very few people outside the industry were watching closely enough to notice all three happening at once. The garage of the future is being negotiated right now, in filings most people will never read and hearings most people will never watch. To make sure you are not the last one to find out what actually gets decided, join us here because this industry is not slowing down to explain itself twice.